What if one small act of kindness could change your life forever? Logan Barrett is a struggling single dad, fighting every day to make ends meet and care for his disabled daughter. He doesn't have much, but when he stops to fix a broken wheelchair for a quiet little boy, he has no idea that simple moment will set something extraordinary in motion. Because standing behind that boy is a woman with a secret. A woman whose heart, like his own, carries more cracks than she lets. And when their worlds collide, they'll both learn. Sometimes the things you fix end up fixing you. If you believe in second chances, in the quiet power of kindness, and in love stories that restore your faith in the world, this one's for you. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and join our community, where we celebrate stories that touch the heart and remind us all life's miracles often begin with a single, selfless act. Now let's begin. Logan Barrett wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his grease-stained hand, squinting against the afternoon sun. The autumn air had a crisp bite, but under the hood of the old pickup he'd been fixing, it felt like the middle of July. Another long day. Another small job barely covering the bills. He glanced across the lot of Miller's garage where he worked part-time and caught sight of the clock on the diner across the street. 3:45 p.m. Just enough time to pick up Ivy from school, run by the pharmacy for her medication, and pray the old Chevy didn't stall out again. Life wasn't always like this. Once, he wore a uniform with pride, a soldier standing tall. Once, he had a partner by his side, laughter echoing through the small home they built together. But war took its toll, and fate finished the job. Now it was just him and Ivy, a 10-year-old girl with eyes too wise for her age and legs too fragile to carry her far. The sound of squeaking wheels snapped him from his thoughts. He turned instinctively, eyes narrowing as a small figure struggled up the sidewalk. A boy, maybe 8, maybe younger. His face pinched in concentration as he tried to maneuver a battered wheelchair over a crack in the pavement. The front wheel wobbled dangerously, clearly misaligned. A woman trailed several feet behind, perhaps his mother, her face buried in her phone, unaware. Without thinking, Logan set down his wrench and crossed the street. "Hey there, buddy," he said gently, crouching down to the boy's level. "Looks like that wheel's giving you trouble." The boy glanced up, startled, but not frightened. His dark brown eyes were sharp, curious, guarded, but polite. "It's always like that," the boy muttered, pushing harder as the wheels scraped noisily. "Mom says we'll fix it soon." Logan smiled, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his back pocket. "How about I take a quick look? Might be able to tighten it up for you." The boy hesitated, glancing back at the woman, still scrolling, still distracted. Finally, he gave a small nod. Logan examined the wheel, fingers skilled and sure despite years of hardship. The axle was loose, the bearing nearly shot. Not a difficult fix, but something that would have left the kid stranded before long. "What's your name?" Logan asked as he worked. "Mason," the boy replied. "What's yours?" Logan, he tightened the bolt carefully. "Well, Mason, seems like you've got a good ride here. Just needs a little TLC." Mason watched him closely, fascinated by how quickly the squeak disappeared. Logan felt the familiar satisfaction of making something broken work again, no matter how small. "There," Logan stood up. "Give it a try." Mason tentatively rolled forward, smooth, no squeak, no wobble. His face lit up, a shy smile breaking through. "Wow. Thanks, Mr. Logan." Before Logan could reply, the woman finally looked up, realizing her son had stopped. She hurried over, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Mason, is everything okay?" Her voice was clipped, polished, but there was an edge of concern. "He fixed my chair, Mom." Mason gestured excitedly. Logan offered a polite nod, wiping his hands again. "Just needed a quick adjustment, no charge." The woman's eyes met his. There was something unreadable there, sharp, assessing. She was beautiful in a distant, untouchable way, dressed in tailored simplicity, like someone used to moving in higher circles. But there was also tension in her posture, as if the weight of the world rested squarely on her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, voice softer now. "That was very kind." Logan shrugged it off. "No trouble at all. Sometimes life throws. Those bumps helps to smooth the ride a little." Her lips curved into a faint smile. She reached for Mason's shoulder, but her gaze lingered on Logan a moment longer than necessary. Then, just like that, she turned away, guiding Mason down the sidewalk. Logan watched them disappear into the afternoon crowd, something stirring faintly in his chest. He couldn't place it. Maybe it was the boy's earnest smile, maybe the woman's guarded eyes, maybe just the knowledge that even strangers carry invisible battles. The bell above the garage door jingled behind him. Frankie Miller's familiar voice called out, "Logan, thought you clocked out 10 minutes ago." Logan gave one last glance toward the street, then turned back, wiping his hands one more time. "Just had a little repair job to finish up," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that this small act of kindness had set something in motion. Wheels, once broken, now turning toward a future far different than he could ever imagine. Amelia Carter sat in the back seat of her Blacktown car, fingers resting idly on her lap as the city passed by in a blur. The tinted windows shielded her from the outside world, but her thoughts wandered back to the man she'd met only hours before, the man who had knelt on the pavement, tightening a loose bolt on Mason's wheelchair as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She glanced at her son seated beside her, quietly looking out the window. Mason hadn't stopped smiling since they left the garage. "Mom," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. He didn't even ask for anything. Amelia's heart softened at the tone in Mason's voice, curious, almost bewildered. She reached over and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Some people do good things because it's the right thing, sweetheart," she said gently. Mason nodded, but didn't say more. She watched him closely, her mind running through the day's events. For a woman who had built walls as high as skyscrapers around herself, the simple act of kindness she'd witnessed today felt like something out of another world. In her universe, favors came with price tags, friendships had fine print, and trust was a commodity rarely given freely. But that man, Logan, she recalled, hadn't even asked for her name, hadn't recognized her, hadn't cared who she was. That unsettled her, more than she wanted to admit. The car slowed as it turned into the private drive leading to her estate. Massive wrought iron gates swung open at the driver's signal, revealing a sprawling home set against manicured lawns and carefully curated gardens. It was a beautiful place, impeccable, isolated. Amelia exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar weight settle on her chest. Wealth had built this sanctuary, but it had also become a fortress. Once inside, she handed her coat to the housekeeper, thanked her quietly, and watched as Mason wheeled himself toward his room, humming under his breath. She paused for a moment, debating, then made her way to the sunroom where she could gather her thoughts. Glass walls surrounded her on three sides, letting in the golden light of late afternoon. Yet, despite the beauty, she felt the hollow ache that never quite disappeared, the sense that she was living life from behind a pane of glass, always observing but rarely participating. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was her assistant, no doubt with another request, another meeting, another negotiation. She set the phone aside. Instead, her mind kept circling back to the man with the steady hands and warm, tired eyes. There had been something in his posture, strong but worn, as though life had demanded far more than its fair share from him. Amelia had seen those same eyes before, in the mirror. A knock at the doorframe pulled her from her thoughts. It was Evelyn, the housekeeper. "Mum," Evelyn said softly. "Your brother called earlier. He's worried about Mason attending public events again. He thinks it's too risky." Amelia smiled faintly. She loved her brother, but his protectiveness often felt like another chain. "Thank you, Evelyn. Tell him I'll handle it," she replied. Once alone, Amelia's gaze drifted outside to where the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the estate grounds. Risk. It was true. After everything, she had spent years minimizing risk. For Mason, for herself. She'd traded spontaneity for control, relationships for safety. It was easier that way, predictable, and yet today, a stranger had knelt beside her son without hesitation, no calculation, no hidden agenda, just a man doing what needed to be done. She wondered when the last time was that she'd met someone like that. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she ignored it completely. Meanwhile, across town, Logan pulled up to his modest two-bedroom house at the edge of town, the Chevy sputtering slightly as he parked. Ivy was already at the window, waving excitedly. He forced a tired smile and climbed out, wiping his hands on his jeans before heading inside. "Hey, kiddo," he greeted, ruffling her hair as she rolled up to meet him in her wheelchair. "How was work?" she asked, eyes bright. "Same as always," he replied with a shrug, but Ivy knew him too well. She studied him for a moment, then grinned. "Did you fix something cool today?" He thought back to Mason, to the easy way the boy had thanked him, the look in his mother's eyes. Something had shifted, though he couldn't put his finger on it. "Actually," he said, sinking onto the worn couch, "I met this kid today. His wheelchair was giving him trouble, so I patched it up." Ivy's face lit up. "That's awesome. I bet he was happy." Logan nodded, but his mind drifted again. There was something about that woman, her polished appearance, the controlled way she carried herself. She didn't belong to his world, but there had been something real behind. Her eyes, he brushed the thought aside. People like her didn't cross paths with people like him more than once. Still, something tugged at him, quiet but persistent. As evening fell over the town, two people in different worlds sat by their windows, both thinking about a brief encounter on a sidewalk, not knowing how profoundly it had already begun to change the course of their lives. Logan Barrett stood at the kitchen counter, staring down at a stack of unpaid bills. The overhead light flickered, casting long shadows across the faded linoleum floor. He rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the familiar tightness creep into his chest. Electricity, mortgage, medical supplies for Ivy, gasoline to get to work. Each envelope felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of them could crush him at any moment. From the living room, Ivy's soft humming floated over the quiet house. She was working on her latest puzzle, the way she always did when she sensed her father needed space. Wise beyond her years, she never asked too many questions. Logan folded the bills neatly and set them aside. No sense worrying her. He glanced at the clock, nearly dinner time. Opening the pantry, he took stock of what was left. A few cans, some rice, pasta. It would stretch, as always. Somehow, he grabbed a box of macaroni and cheese and got to work. Movements practiced, efficient. His hands, rough from years of labor, moved almost mechanically. But inside, his mind churned. Ever since yesterday, ever since he helped that boy, Mason, there'd been a subtle shift in him. He couldn't quite explain it. The woman's face lingered in his thoughts, the guarded look she'd given him, like she'd built walls higher than his own. He shook the thought away. No point wondering about people who lived in worlds far removed from his. He had enough on his plate. A soft voice behind him broke the silence. "Dad, do you need help?" Logan turned to see Ivy rolling into the kitchen, her wheelchair maneuvering easily through the narrow space. She wore that determined expression he knew too well, chin slightly lifted, eyes bright but observant. "Nah, kiddo," he said, forcing a smile. "I've got it." She studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "Okay, but I can set the table." He watched as she reached up, grabbing plates from the lower cabinet he'd installed just for her. She did it all without complaint, without fuss, the way she always had. God, she was strong, stronger than he'd ever been. They sat down to dinner, chatting about her day, school projects, books she wanted to read, the latest antics of their neighbor's over-enthusiastic golden retriever. Logan laughed at all the right moments, listening, but his mind kept drifting. Afterward, Ivy wheeled over to her puzzle again, and Logan stepped outside, leaning against the porch railing as dusk settled over the quiet neighborhood. The air was cool, tinged with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. Frankie Miller's old pickup rumbled up the street, headlights cutting through the dark. A moment later, the familiar figure of Frankie climbed out, walking up the steps with his usual unhurried gait. "Evening, Logan," Frankie greeted, settling beside him on the porch. "Evening, Frankie," Logan replied, nodding. They stood in companionable silence for a while, the way men who've known each other for years often do. Finally, Frankie spoke. "You looked like you had something on your mind at the shop today." Logan let out a breath, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Ran into a kid yesterday. His wheelchair was busted. Fixed it up real quick." Frankie chuckled. "Of course you did. Can't help yourself." Logan shrugged, but there was something heavier in his posture. "The kid's mom, she was different," he admitted quietly. "Polite, grateful, but I don't know. Like she's carrying something heavy too." Frankie gave him a sideways glance. "Sounds familiar." Logan laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm not looking for anything, Frankie." "I know that," Frankie replied. "But sometimes life's looking for you." They stood quietly. Again, the weight of unspoken thoughts settling between them. After a while, Frankie clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a good man, Logan. Maybe it's time you stopped closing every door before someone has the chance to knock." Logan didn't reply, but the words lingered long after Frankie's truck disappeared down the street. Later that night, after Ivy had fallen asleep, Logan sat alone at the kitchen table, a cup of black coffee cooling in front of him. He stared at the pile of bills, at the small, worn photo of Ivy and her mother tucked into the corner of the fridge. The loneliness pressed in hard tonight, but beneath it, a flicker, something quiet but persistent. Not quite hope, not yet. He didn't know it, but the wheels of something much bigger had already begun to turn. The sound of the bell above Miller's garage jingled faintly as Logan wiped his hands on a rag, glancing up from beneath the hood of an old station wagon. It was late afternoon, sunlight slanting long shadows across the concrete floor. The place was quiet for once. Frankie had stepped out for parts, leaving Logan to finish up the last job of the day. He didn't expect anyone else to walk through the door. When he saw her, the woman from the other day, he straightened instinctively, heart giving a small, inexplicable jolt. Amelia Carter stood in the doorway, framed by the light, dressed simply but elegantly in dark jeans and a fitted jacket. There was something deliberate in her posture, poised yet hesitant, as if she wasn't used to walking into places like this. Their eyes met. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then she offered a polite smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Logan wiped his hands again, clearing his throat. "Not at all. How's the boy? Wheelchair holding up?" Her smile softened slightly. "It's been running smoother than ever. Mason wanted me to thank you again." He nodded, unsure what else to say. He wasn't used to visitors, especially not ones like her. Amelia stepped further inside, glancing around at the garage. Organized chaos, tools lining the walls, the faint smell of oil and rubber lingering in the air. "I'm actually here for, well, I could use some help," she said, pausing briefly before adding, "with my car." Logan raised an eyebrow, mildly surprised. It was clear from the way she spoke, from the way she carried herself, that she wasn't the type to frequent small-town garages. but there she was. "Sure," he said, motioning toward the side bay. "What seems to be the issue?" Amelia led him outside, where a sleek black SUV was parked at the curb. Logan took one look and immediately recognized it as a top-tier luxury model. Not something you saw much around these parts. "Making a strange noise when I turned," she explained. "Thought maybe better to have someone local look at it." Logan knelt beside the front tire, inspecting it methodically. "Could be a simple alignment issue." Amelia watched him work, her eyes flicking to the grease smudges on his shirt, the practiced ease of his movements. There was something grounding about the way he moved through the world, steady, unhurried, different from the polished, calculated people she dealt with daily. After a moment, she spoke again, quieter. "You didn't have to fix Mason's chair the other day." Logan glanced up briefly. "Didn't seem right to leave it broken." She smiled faintly. "Not many people would have stopped." He shrugged, rising to his feet. "Seems like there's enough folks walking by in this world. Doesn't hurt to stop once in a while." Their eyes met again, hers thoughtful, his guarded but kind. For a heartbeat, something passed between them, unspoken but real. Logan finished the quick fix, brushing off his hands. "Should be fine now, but bring it back if it acts up again." Amelia nodded, reaching into her purse. "Let me—" He shook his head before she could offer. "No charge." She hesitated, lips parting slightly. "I wasn't—" "It's not about that," he said simply, cutting her off but not unkindly. "Not everything's got a price tag." For a moment, she stood very still. Then quietly she said, "Thank you." Logan gave a small nod, stepping back as she climbed into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, but before pulling away, she lowered the window, voice softer now. "Logan, do you and your daughter ever come by the park on Sundays? Mason loves to feed the ducks there." He blinked, surprised by the question, and by the fact that she remembered his daughter. "Sometimes," he answered cautiously. She smiled. "Maybe we'll see you there." With that, she drove off, leaving Logan standing on the curb, staring after her, unsure what to make of the invitation, lingering in the air. That evening, Logan sat on the porch with Ivy as the sun dipped below the horizon. She was humming softly, fiddling with one of her puzzles when she looked up at him. "Dad," she said suddenly, "why are you smiling?" Logan hadn't realized he was. He shook his head, chuckling under his breath. "Just thinking about that lady who stopped by," Ivy teased, eyes sparkling. He gave her a mock stern look. "What do you know about it?" "Nothing," she said innocently, "but you haven't smiled like that in a while." Logan leaned back, the cool evening, breeze brushing past. Maybe she was right. Maybe, just maybe, life still had a few surprises left. Sunday mornings in Maplewood were always quiet, the kind of quiet that felt like the world itself had paused to take a deep breath. Logan liked it that way. No rush, no noise, just him and Ivy rolling down the cracked sidewalk toward the town. In park, Ivy's wheelchair hummed softly beside him as she maneuvered it with practiced ease. Her hair was pulled back into a loose braid, a few strands escaping to dance in the morning breeze. "Dad, can we bring some bread for the ducks?" she asked, glancing up at him. Logan smiled, reaching into the brown paper bag under his arm. "Already ahead of you?" Ivy grinned, eyes lighting up. Simple things still made her happiest, and Logan treasured that about her. The park was nearly empty, save for a few joggers and an elderly couple feeding pigeons near the bench. They made their way to the pond, the familiar sight of ducks paddling lazily across the water, greeting them. Logan settled onto a bench, letting Ivy scatter bits of bread near the edge. She laughed softly as the ducks crowded around, feathers ruffling, beaks darting eagerly. He watched her, heart aching just a little. She carried herself so well, strong, independent, but there were moments he could see it in her eyes, that quiet longing she never voiced. A rustling sound caught his attention. He looked up to see Mason wheeling toward them, a delighted smile spreading across his face. "Hey, Ivy," Mason called out, waving one hand. Ivy's head snapped up, her face breaking into a smile just as bright. "Mason!"